Major funding for these broadcasts is made possible by grants from Capital One Bank and Chase Commercial Term Lending, the Witkoff Group, New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, Greenberg Traurig, Perfect Building Maintenance, Genova Burns. Additional funding is provided by grants from AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Colliers International NYC, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, Customers Bank, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Fisher Brothers, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Foley & Lardner, Friedman, Handler Real Estate Organization, HAP Investment Developers, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Chairman USRealty.com, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, N.A., Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, Newbanks, MHP Real Estate Services, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Sterling Risk, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, the Continuum Company, the CUNY TV Foundation, the Moynihan Group, and these friends.
Schmatters, shirts, wrestling, golf, investment banking, hedge fund. I have an individual who's had a unique career. I have Larry Leeds. Thanks for being here today.
Gee, Mike, I'm flattered to be here. I've admired a lot of your shows, and to be part of it is a privilege.
You told me when we got together, it's your paternal grandparents who end up in Paterson, New Jersey?
It was actually my paternal great-grandparents.
I mean, your great-grandparents.
Who did. And I believe that my great-grandfather was a peddler who sold shirts out of a pack and looked across the Hudson River, saw the Manhattan skyline, said that would be a great name for a shirt, and started the Manhattan Shirt Company.
So the Manhattan Shirt Company, which was in Paterson, New Jersey, was started like in 1857. And, you know, the company continued to survive, which we'll talk later on, really, and it does today, even partially with Salant Industries, for more than over 150 years. So let's talk a little bit about yourself. Tell me about your father. Your father...
My father, a pretty difficult guy, but accomplished. He started off in the family shirt business. By 1929, he decided to leave, and he wanted to go to Wall Street, so he paid the most that anyone had ever paid at that moment.
He paid a record $600,000.
Plus, yeah.
In 1929.
Those dollars, boy. And to get a seat on the New York Stock Exchange. And he formed a specialist firm with a fellow named Harold Spear, and it became Spear Leeds, and it was a successful small little specialist firm. And then in 1936, he hired a young graduate of Williams named Jimmy Kellogg, James Crane Kellogg III, who was a fabulous guy. And he ended up becoming the third partner, became Spear Leeds and Kellogg. And Jimmy Kellogg became chairman of the New York Port Authority, chairman of the Board of Governors of New York Stock Exchange. He was a terrific guy. My father had an alcohol problem and left the business when he was in his late 50s and passed away when he was 70. But the firm, and Harold Spear retired, and the Kellogg family took over the firm. And they built it, and they made it better and better and greater and greater. And then they sold it for, I think, $7.4 million
to
Goldman Sachs.
So that's Dad. Let's talk about Mom.
By the way, I didn't get a penny out of it, but it was a great sale.
Now, your mother was a very interesting woman. Your mother and father, she was 19 when she married your dad.
My mother was amazing. First of all, was a great beauty. And when she was 19, she had a Hollywood contract offered her. Instead, she married my father, who was 32 when she was 19. And they had a very glamorous life for a few years. And by the time they were married 7 years, they were separated. My mother was an intellectual. She had extreme left-wing positioning in the 30s. She even went to Russia a couple of times. But she was a bachelor woman in New York, one of the great beauties in the city. I think her funniest stunt, she was Bohemian. She decided to raise white mice and guinea pigs. So she went into El Morocco, the restaurant, with her white ermine coat, with a cage of these animals under her coat, and released them on the floor of El Morocco as an advertising stunt. I mean, that's how, and she also took up for a number of years with Norman Belgettis, who was the great industrial designer of his day. And together, they built the greatest exhibit in the 1939 World's Fair.
The GM exhibit.
The General Motors exhibit called the Futurama, which showed what the world would look like, or the United States would look like in 50 years. And she did that, and then she realized the war was happening, and she wanted to do something. So she was a little short, but she bonked herself in the head to gain an eighth of an inch or something, and passed the physical to become a WASP, which was a woman's air service pilot. And she was involved in flying B-17 bombers from where they were made in Kansas to the port where the regular Army Air Force pilots would pick them up. She did that for a year and a half and then left that. She was then sitting around her apartment one day, and she got a phone call from a fellow she hadn't seen for 20 years, who'd known her at camp when she was 14. His name was Harry Schwarzschild. He was the skipper of a destroyer escort in the North Atlantic, had rammed a German submarine and sank it off of Newfoundland, into Brooklyn Navy Yard for repairs, calls my mother. They go out, and they get married the day the war ends.
And then my mother got to Richmond.
Moves to Richmond, Virginia, where my left-leaning mother became right of Goldwater, sort of almost going from communism to fascism almost. But she was terrific. She became the grande dame of Richmond, and she was working away on her computer when she was 98 when she finally died. Right. I mean, she was a great athlete, good golfer. I think won the city golf championship in Richmond one year. She was terrific. She was beautiful, learned, educated, and she was the Annie-Mame. She was terrific.
So let's talk about your growing up. You were born in 1929 when your dad went into the stock market over there, going with his partner Spear, and you told me you went to public school. You went to Lawrenceville Academy.
Well, I went to the Hunter Model School, which is a grammar school for supposedly bright kids. They kicked out all the boys after the 6th grade. They made it only women, no longer co-ed. So then I spent 2 years at Riverdale, and then I went away to prep school to Lawrenceville.
So you were in Lawrenceville, which is very close to Princeton, but then you went to Yale. How'd that happen?
I don't know. I was accepted at a bunch of schools, and something about Yale really appealed to me, and I'm glad I went there.
So when you were at Yale, you were a pretty good athlete. You were a wrestler.
Yeah, I wrestled for Yale, and I played golf for Yale. But wrestling was the main thing.
After that, it was the war. Then you were in the Navy.
Korean War. After I got out of OCS and Navy Supply Corps School, I got my orders for a destroyer off the Korean coast. It wasn't dangerous because they didn't do anything to the ships, but it would have been dangerous being on land. But I was going there, but I won the base golf championship, and then they had the 3rd Naval District Golf Championship out at Bethpage. And I had about a 4-foot putt on the last hole to win it, and I sank it. So I won this big tournament. And it was the same time Gene Littler was winning a pretty good golf. And a week later, they changed my orders from Korea to Brooklyn to play service golf, and I had a desk job too, but I played a lot of golf for the Navy. Admirals would come and senators would come. I played golf with them.
Now, you also, so you were stationed at the Brooklyn Navy Yard?
No, actually in Bush Terminal,
Bush Terminal over there.
And then, this is the amazing part of the story. I've been married almost 60 years. It'll be 60 years this year. And so while I was stationed, once I just got stationed in Brooklyn, my wife, who's Israeli, came to visit the United States. And I met her. We ended up going to a Yale-Columbia game a week later and got married within the year. Now, I really believe that if I hadn't sunk that putt on the last hole of that tournament, I would have been in Korea.
And you would have
I would never met my wife.
So you finished the Navy, and then you decided to go to Wharton.
Yeah.
And you spent 2 years...
No, I went to Wharton before I went in the Navy.
Right. So now you finished the Navy, you have an MBA from Wharton, you have an undergraduate degree from Yale, and how do you decide to enter, as one would say, the family business, which was a publicly held company at that time?
It sounded like a good deal, and my father had talked me out of going to Cary Leeds. He said it was a terrible business, and they really didn't need me, but they'd be glad to have me, but he didn't recommend it. You know, so anyway, I went in the other business, and I figured, hell, I can do that. And I did end up eventually running the company.
Now, during the period of time you were there, you were very innovative with the development and products, but one of the things that you were involved with was the Vera division with Perry Ellis. How did that happen?
That's a nice story. First of all, Vera was a lovely company. She was a great lady, and that was one of our first acquisitions. We took Manhattan Shirt Company from being just that, Manhattan Shirt Company, making shirts, and then Lady Manhattan. And by the time we were done, we had 18 companies. We made acquisitions, we started companies. It became Manhattan Industries. And one of the companies we bought was Vera, and they made scarves, table linens, and women's sportswear. And they had a little designer down there. And the head of the division called me up and said, look, I've got this little designer. I'd like to give him a show. Can I have $5,000? I said, I'll come down and look at the clothes. Heterosexual males don't know that much about clothes, judging women's clothes, but they looked okay to me. So I said, sure. And then I called up all the leading fashion authorities. John Fairchild, who passed away very recently, who ran Women's Wear and Fairchild publications. Right. And Bernadine Morris and Carrie Donovan from the Times and John Duca, all the real highfalutin fashion people. And I said, I have this little designer. I'd like you to come 2 weeks from Thursday to my office. We'll put on a show. And they all fell in love with Perry Ellis. That was the derivation beginning. We owned the company. He was the most talented guy. Ralph Lauren used to ask to come with me we'd go together. Anna Wintour, we didn't have a ticket, but she showed up. She ended up sitting in my lap one time. I mean, and he became the cause célèbre, the darling of the whole fashion world. And unfortunately, he passed away within 5 or 6 years because he got AIDS when people didn't even know what it was.
Right. But when you were at Manhattan, which we subsequently became the president and the CEO, you grew Manhattan's earnings and profitability, I think, 14 times in the stock.
I think 24 times.
Okay. 14 to 24.
But it started from a very low base.
No question.
It was almost busted when the board, it was very tense. There was sort of a boardroom coup where I had a cousin who had been running it, I think, incorrectly, and the company was doing badly, and the board asked me to take over, and so I started from a low base. But actually, it was up 24 times between when I became CEO and when we turned the company over to Salant after the hostile takeover.
This was the time that Michael Milken was picking up companies and looking for acquisitions, utilizing, the bonds, which had, the junk bonds. And at that time, so afterwards, when Salant takes it over, you now go back into something that your father was in. You go into Buckingham.
Yeah, well, that was nice. It turned out to be a very nice story. But I'll say this about, in those days, Milken, I never met Milken when this was happening. I've got to know him since. I think he's the brightest, most remarkable guy I've ever met. And what he's done for fighting cancer, especially prostate cancer, is amazing. But what happened, there's a little sell-side boutique called Buckingham Research, and they covered Manhattan. And the analyst who covered me, I used to have lunch with him once in a while, and they asked me after I got fired. I mean, not only we were taken over, but I was booted out. Here I'd done, I thought, a pretty terrific job. And the arrogant people who took it over, and they bankrupted, by the way, they bankrupted it in 2 years, and then they went bankrupt again.
Themselves later.
They went bankrupt twice. So anyway, I went down and had lunch with David Keaton, who's the CEO of Buckingham Research, and he said, well, why don't you come here and learn the business? I said, okay. And all of a sudden I became an analyst because I did know a lot about retail apparel and footwear. And I became a Wall Street analyst. And strangely enough, I was a pretty good seller. And one of my slogans was, if I can sell Perry Ellis to Bloomingdale's, I can sell Ralph Lauren Polo to Fidelity.
At a different time, as I always use adaptability, you're 57 or 58 at that time. 59, you go into the new business, you go in as an analyst, and you create basically a hedge fund.
Well, no, that comes after. See, I was an analyst, that's called sell side. Then one of my clients was a brilliant, amazing guy, who I saw last night, by the way. His name Michael Steinhardt, who was a legend for what he does for other people and what he did for me. He said, I think you're really bright, terrific, because I gave him some stock ideas that worked. He said, here's $10 million, start a hedge fund, which I did, and it's worked out kind of well.
Right.
But I would never have been able to do that without him.
Right, and that hedge fund specialized basically in the
called,
retail.
It was called Buckingham RAF.
Right.
RAF did not stand for the Royal Air Force. Retail, apparel, and footwear.
But you were saying to me when you were growing up, you met Roy Goodman. Tell me about Roy Goodman and you.
Well, I was 6 years old and Roy was 5. And my mother had bought me a beautiful hat at Brooks Brothers. And Roy stole it in Central Park. We were both at the Healy Club, which was a afternoon place you went after school to. And I started crying, and Roy felt badly, and we became friends. And we were both only kids. So we'd spend every weekend, one weekend at his house, one week at my house, and we became closer than brothers.
We have that great picture of you with Roy and with your other buddy, John Rosenwald.
We were the Three Musketeers.
How'd you meet John?
His father used to date my mother.
So this was another one that...
Another long time. And his great line, when he toasts me or something, because he says, my father used to date his mother, and I could have been he, and he could have been me. That's Roosevelt a great joke teller.
But when you're in the circles of being with John Rosenwald, you also learn to be very involved with charity in the community, and you've been involved on FIT, the NYU Langone, and a number of other things. But something that you've really been involved with a great deal of your time is you lost a son a number of years ago. And he was a great tennis player.
He was a player.
He went to Yale.
Went to Yale, played one for Yale for 4 years, turned pro, got to 12 in the world in doubles, about 85 in singles. He was a wonderful, voted the most handsome player on the circuit. BVD in Taiwan put him up. He was the Jim Palmer of Taiwanese underwear. He was posed at big billboards all over Taiwan. But he was terrific. He died when he was 45.
Right. He went into the software business after.
Yes.
After he finished
founded a company, one of these great, bubble companies. It was a stock. His stock went from 50 cents to $90 to zero. It was one of those.
You told me when we got together is when your mother moved down to Richmond, there were some people there was a kid by the name of Ash.
Oh, that's a nice story too.
Which relates to tennis and to the
My mother, when she moved down, they had a nice house, and they had one person living in the house taking care of driving, cooking, cleaning up, and doing stuff. And his name was Ash. And he had a little 4-year-old boy running around the house, was very nice, who grew up to be the greatest American tennis player, one of the great players of the world, Arthur Ashe. But and I knew him later on. I mean, he was a super guy. In fact, talking about Cary, about Ashe, my life's work for the last 10 years, a lot of it, has been trying to give meaning to my son's life. I endowed the Yale tennis coaching position. I helped them build their new indoor courts with a lobby named after my son with a picture. But the big thing, and we are building the largest tennis facility in New York, and it's for underprivileged kids.
It's in
the Bronx.
Crotona.
It's Crotona Park, and it's 22 courts, 10 will be bubbled, a 1,000-seat stadium for junior tennis, and a clubhouse that got the award from Mayor Bloomberg as being the outstanding single architectural plan in New York City.
Now this is part of the Junior Tennis League, right?
It's being run by them, and it's going to be the place. I mean, but they're managing it. It really belongs to them now. We've raised $27 million, about half from the private sector and half from the public sector.
How do you decide to create this program?
Well, it was suggested to me by a man named Skip Hartman, who was president of the New York Junior Tennis League. And he'd coached Cary when he was 11 and 12 years old. And he said this would be a great thing to do. But we had small ideas when we started, and it's taken us 10 years, literally. We opened officially
June 15th.
June 15th.
For the dedication. And I know that last year, I think you had one of your best dinners. I think you raised like $1.8 million at the dinner for the center over there.
We've been very lucky. And
now, you've also spent a lot of time with FIT.
Well, I really admire what FIT stands for. And I think all of America could learn from FIT. And that's it. The German economy and the German industry is very successful because they really have a great deal of vocational education. And people leave those schools with considerable skills, be it a mason or bricklayer, auto mechanic, electronics, computer, whatever it is. They have some specialty that they've learned that enables them to make a nice living and contribute to the country and to its industry. FIT graduates more students than Yale University every year, almost twice as many. 95% get jobs here in this city, and they come from all over, but mostly from around here. And if you think about it, they get jobs. They learn skills.
And they also help the economy of New York by creating, new...
Then they contribute. I mean, but it's the greatest thing. I mean, 2,000 kids getting jobs every year and having generally pretty darn successful careers. Now, if you have a liberal... I'm a liberal arts graduate, but most or many liberal arts graduates leave school and they don't have any particular skill, and it's very hard to get jobs, especially in today's world. So I think that vocational education, with a good smattering of liberal arts in there, I mean, at FIT, they have literature and music, they have all sorts of...
It's a great school.
That goes in there, but they come out with a skill. And so I'm on that board, and I contribute to them. I try to raise money for them. And I think Joyce Brown, who's married to Carl McCall, I think she's a great CEO down there. So another board I'm on is Langone Hospital. And what Ken Langone has done down there, and how progressive and terrific that hospital has become. I mean, it's become one of the best hospitals in America. And they've raised billions of dollars. They're rebuilding. They withstood and recovered from the flood, which was incredible down there, practically wiped the place out. They've bounced back. They're better than ever. And I find it very rewarding when you see something blossoming in front of your eyes.
We recently did a show specifically on the NYU Langone Medical Center talking about how the growth and development.
Well, Bob Grossman was, and he's terrific.
So tell me about your kids, your grandkids.
Well, I'll start with my kids. My son, as you know, passed away. I have two terrific daughters.
Their names?
Their name are Ashley and Tracy. They were born at 5 o'clock on August 4th, 6 years apart. Ashley went to Harvard. Tracy went to Yale. Ashley's married to a fellow named Chris Harland, who was just a super guy. Family's from New Zealand, and he is a vice chairman at Morgan Stanley. He's running Latin America for them now.
And their kids?
3 boys. None of them could get into Yale. They all ended up at Harvard. That's my joke. One of them's graduated. He's working for a hedge fund now. I have a grandson who's 25. And the other 2 are they a junior and senior year in Cambridge at Harvard.
And the other daughter?
Tracy lives in San Francisco. She's married to a fellow named Evan Marwell. Both my son-in-laws went to Harvard, too. He's pretty amazing. He started a telephone call center company that was very successful. The Tisch family bought half of it. He then left there and made a fair amount of money. And then
now he's doing this program.
Started a hedge fund. Joined a hedge fund, worked there for a few years, and then didn't know what he was going to do. And he ended up in the White House somehow.
Right. And
he got this idea, and he had started a non-for-profit called Educational Superhighway.
I know.
And what they're out to do is
to put the internet in all the schools.
That's right.
Larry, I think the story of, the family that started in Paterson, New Jersey, from being a peddler to yourself, golf, wrestling.
I ran marathons, too.
And marathons, and we have that picture. I'm so happy that you were here today. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks a lot.